We have a little bit of time before we're going to start. So by all means, let me fool around here with this layout because I want to do some different things. I don't want y'all to feel like you have to. I'm going to hide names, okay, so that you don't feel imposed on, okay? I have issues with y'all being forced into doing this with your images there. That's interesting. Okay. All right. And my phone's going to ring and your phone's going to ring and we're all going to get interrupted because this isn't, live professional television by any stretch. Although everything is judged on the values of entertainment now. And so there's always this pressure for us to be perfect. And I think that's difficult for us. I think that's very difficult for us because we're talking about production values that are we're competing with television, and that's very difficult. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Do I need to turn the sound up a little? Okay.
Hear you.
I can barely hear y'all though. And so let me see if I can make y'all a little louder. Okay. That's just the alert volume. Output volume. Here we go. Whoop, whoop. Is that too loud? I bet I can hear you much better now. Okay.
I can hear you.
Great. And there'll be a tape with transcripts of this, and I will post that always because it's good morning. It's very difficult to take notes and pay attention to everything that's going on at the same time. I mean, you're having to be not just a passive audience. You can't just sit back and enjoy this. You've got so many things going on, and this business of working from home, while it's convenient, the cats are here, the dogs are here, the husband unit's here. They'll probably come and mow the yard right in the middle of us having class, and it'll make lots of noise, and there we are. So let's try to have a sense of humor about what all this means in the giant scheme of things, and not be overwhelmed by it and not be intimidated by it, because we're really fundamentally here to have a good time. And I think this ought to be fun. And yeah, it's serious. And we're talking about awful things and really depressing stuff. But it doesn't have to be that way. And if something bothers you and something depresses you that we're talking about, you ought to say, wow, that really worries me, or wow, I'm really concerned about that. Because it is overwhelming. And I don't want y'all to feel overwhelmed by this at all. I think you should try to enjoy this, because after all you're going through a tremendous amount of change in your life at one of the most difficult times in our country's history. I would have to say, and I don't think this is hyperbole, a sustained difficult time, not like an immediate crisis, like it's not the Cuban Missile Crisis, which 13 days. It's not like that. It is one of the most difficult times since World War II. And I'm older than you, and I'm probably old enough to be your grandmother. And what I have seen is that this particular time, in all walks of our lives, is incredibly difficult. And oh, how do we take attendance? First of all, I don't worry about it. It has no impact on your grade whatsoever. I appreciate you coming to class, but I am not going to penalize you if you don't. Every time you turn the computer on and log in to Canvas, I know. So it takes attendance for us. So don't sweat that, okay? Do not worry about that. We're just here, you know, like Mick Jagger says, y'all, life is just a cocktail party on the street, right? So we're just here to discuss this government thing. I opened the New York Times today, and there's an article in there, and I know it's behind a paywall, and you should have a subscription to the New York Times or to the Washington Post, even though those two newspapers are evolving and becoming almost parodies of themselves. It's really sad to see how awful those two giants have become. Just really poor reporting, terrible reporting. But you should have a subscription to the New York Times, to the Washington Post. You should read a national newspaper. I think the LA Times is a fine paper, and you should take a look at the LA Times. That paper's a good paper, and the Boston Globe is a good paper. So you should read a print newspaper. I know that you get your news from other places. I respect that. But reading like that gives you some distance and some analysis and some ability to experience it a different way. And I think that's important. It's helpful to your learning. Where were we? Reading a good paper. That's important. I opened the New York Times today, and there's a story in the Times about Texas government that I want to read to you. I want you to experience this. Why do people text me when I'm in class? Doesn't the world know that I'm talking to y'all? Hang on, let me get rid of him. Okay, there we go. The New York Times has a story today about your Texas Attorney General and mine, Ken Paxton. I went to Baylor with Ken. Ken sat next to me in a seminar on the presidency and in a class. I don't remember the name of the class, but I remember, of course, who taught it. It was a political participation class about voting. And about advertising and media. And so what I'm going to read you is kind of ironic and kind of disturbing about my former classmate, Ken Paxton, and what Texas government has become like. Hang on a second. It's impossible for me to do this without a Diet Coke. So Ken Paxton is my age. He was my classmate at Baylor. And Ken is the Texas Attorney General. Now, to give you some background about that, the Texas Attorney General is elected statewide by the voters of Texas. And Paxton has been one of the longest serving attorneys general. I used to work for Texas Attorney General Jim Maddox. Right when I got out of graduate school, General Maddox hired me to be his legislative analyst And what that person did, what I did, was track all legislation that affected the Texas Attorney General's office, including legislation on the national level that was important to him. He was a former congressman. He was my congressman in Dallas, but that's not why he hired me. He hired me because of a long story, and I'll get into that story later. But I want you to realize what's the Texas Attorney General do, and why is this story so important? This was one of those coffee spitting stories this morning when I looked at the newspaper and had my coffee and said, "Holy cow, Ken Paxton does it again." Um, the Texas Attorney General is the state's civil lawyer. He represents the state of Texas in litigation. If somebody sues the state of Texas, Paxton defends the state. If the Attorney General wants to get aggressive about an issue confronting and concerning Texans, he can go about it that way. This story will alarm you because clearly it's an abuse of power and something that I, as a former Texas Attorney General employee, I'm pretty upset about this. I'm pretty shocked. The fact that I used to work for the Attorney General of Texas, Jim Maddox, the fact that I know this guy, Attorney General Ken Paxton, I sent this story to one of our classmates at Baylor, who was in a fraternity with Paxton. So I'm sure she's just livid. That was him texting me a while ago. It's about this. So let me read the story to you because I want you to get a good introduction. Now, again, what does the Texas Attorney General do? The Texas Attorney General represents the state of Texas in civil litigation. He is not supposed to be concerned with criminal matters. That's your local district attorney, okay, not the Attorney General. And the Texas Attorney General, his word has the force of constitutional law. He's one of the most powerful figures in the post-Reconstruction world. And we have had some tremendous individuals serve the people of Texas as Attorney General. Jim Maddox, Mark White, amazing figures who understood the importance of protecting Texans' civil rights. Okay, so the headline in this paper, in this story, I don't know if you could see, I'm not set up on this computer to share the New York Times with you, but I'll put a link up after class. But it's behind a paywall. Maybe, oh, there's a way to go about that too. And you can go through HCC Library to get materials that are behind a paywall. You should speak to a librarian about that. They do a super good job with that. This is Latino Civil Rights Group demands inquiry into Texas voter fraud raids. The group said many of those targeted by the raids, conducted by a unit created by the state attorney general, Ken Paxton, were Democrats and election volunteers. Now, this woman sitting here, she's 87 years old. And this was what happened to her. Her name is Lydia Martinez, and her house was raided last Tuesday. She said, I felt harassed. Latino civil rights group demands inquiry into Texas voter fraud raids. A Latino civil rights group is asking the Department of Justice. Now, the Department of Justice, that is headed by the Attorney General, and the Attorney General is appointed by the President, subject to Senate confirmation. So we kind of jump back and forth between Texas and the US government in our discussions about these things. So eventually you're going to get fluid in that ability to switch jurisdictions like that. And let me tell you something. Sometimes these words, these legal terms, they blow past us. And if we'll back up and we'll slow down and we'll ask ourselves, wait a minute, who has jurisdiction here? What is jurisdiction? What does that mean? Slow down. Don't be embarrassed because you're not familiar with a legal term immediately. For heaven's sakes, people had to go to law school for this. You know, people had to do a lot of reading for this. So when you don't know something, and I'm talking to you, say, whoa, wait a minute, you're going too fast. Tell me what that means. You know, don't be intimidated by this. And don't let an opportunity to learn and build vocabulary pass you by, because it's tremendously important for you to be comfortable about this. And you'll get there. You're not going to get there overnight. You'll get there. A Latino civil rights group is asking the Department of Justice to open an investigation into a series of raids conducted on Latino voters, voting activists, and political operatives as part of a sprawling voter fraud inquiry by the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The League of United Latin American Citizens, that's LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, one of the nation's oldest Latino civil rights organizations, said that many of those targeted were Democratic leaders and election volunteers, and that some were older residents. Gabriel Rosales, the director of the group's Texas chapter, said that officers conducting the raids took cell phones, computers, and documents. He called the raids, quote, alarming, and said that they were an effort to suppress Latino voters. In a statement last week, Mr. Paxton, a Republican, described the raids carried out in counties near San Antonio and South Texas as part of, quote, an ongoing election integrity investigation, end quote, that began 2 years ago to look into allegations of election fraud and vote harvesting. I have to explain something to you. Voter fraud is extremely rare. People just do not engage in voter fraud. You get a voter ID, a voter registration card when you register to vote. You get a voter registration card from the county. You take your card and your driver's license and you go to the poll and you vote. Okay? How do you cheat at that? And when somebody brings this up to you and says, oh, this group cheats, or oh, that group cheats, ask them, how do they do that? Because it is not easily done. And it's usually a mistake. There's usually not malice involved. In the last 5 years or so, you have had rare incidents where people who were not yet eligible to vote filled out a provisional ballot and technically voted. They were not eligible to vote. They did believe that they were eligible to vote. the elections official is supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt, and that process we'll get into a little later. But my point is this: I want you to understand that voter fraud is rare. It is not like it was in our nation's history, where you literally had dead people rise from the grave and in all the same handwriting sign in and vote. No. Okay. So, how do you fix these votes? That's a good question. And I'm telling you, it just doesn't happen. And it certainly doesn't merit an investigation. They get an 87-year-old woman out of bed to answer the door for people to come in and raid her home. Okay. So his office, General Paxton. Oh, and by the way, that's the proper address, General Paxton. Okay. I know that sounds kind of militaristic, but remember, he's the Attorney General of Texas. And so you refer to him as General. Okay. His office said that it will not comment on the investigation because it's still underway. That investigation is part of a unit, the Elections Integrity Unit. And by the way, when I worked at the Attorney General's office, we didn't have an Elections Integrity Unit because the Attorney General at that time didn't have any jurisdiction over the matter. That's the Secretary of State's office. That's their responsibility, okay, to look into those kinds of issues. The Attorney General has broad, tremendous power, but election fraud just wasn't part of that equation at that time. So it was created. You may ask, so how did they get the ability to do this? Well, this Election Integrity Unit, which was created as Republican-led states sought to crack down on supposed voter crime after former President Donald J. Trump began making false claims of fraud in the wake of the 2020 election. If you will recall, former presidents said that the election was stolen. And there were 60 court cases, and Attorney General Paxton sued on behalf of Texas and the people of Texas, and all of that was thrown out of court. There was absolutely no evidence of voter fraud. The 2020 election was one of the most closely monitored, closely watched elections in this country's history, because everyone knew if Trump loses, he says it's rigged. And he said that time and time again. So the allegations that something was going to be wrong with the 2020 election were apparent. And so people were cautious and watching that election closely. Experts have found that voter fraud remains rare. Republican district attorneys and state attorneys general have been promoting aggressive prosecutions in voter fraud cases, sometimes making felony cases out of instances that might have just been labeled mistakes in the past. Well, it gets your name in the paper, helps them get reelected, helps them intimidate people, scare people when they go to vote. On Tuesday, Mr. Rosales said officers raided the home of Cecilia Castellano, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that, a Democrat running against Don McLaughlin, the former mayor of Uvalde, for a state house seat, and they took her cell phone. Ms. Costello described her experience as very frightening, and she said she still didn't know why she was targeted. This is all political, she said. Last week, officers broke down a door to raid the home. They couldn't walk, just knock. They broke down the door, certainly makes a statement, of Manuel Medina, a consultant for Ms. Castellano's campaign and the chair of the Tejano Democrats, a group that advocates Hispanic representation in the Democratic Party. Do not assume that all Hispanics vote Democratic. Never lump. There is a tendency in political science to lump groups together, and it's not true. They don't. There is deep divisions in the Hispanic community about voting, and even the use of the name Hispanic is not always appropriate. It's sometimes resented, and it's very inaccurate, and it's not descriptive because it's a very rich, not uniform group of people that gets labeled Hispanic when in fact that may not be the best descriptive term to use. At any rate, let's go back to this article. I quote, "I have been contacted by elderly residents who were confused and frightened, wondering why they've been singled out," Mr. Rosales says, "is pure intimidation." One of those residents was Lydia Martinez, an 87-year-old retired educator in San Antonio. She said she heard a knock on her door. They did knock before 6 a.m. She thought maybe it was a neighbor that needed some milk and eggs, and she fastened her sleeping gown and opened the door. 9 officers, 7 of them men, some with guns in holsters, then pushed open the door, marched past a living room wall decorated with crucifixes. "I got scared," she recalled in an interview on Sunday, speaking in both English and Spanish. "They told me, 'We have a warrant to search your house.' I asked why. I felt harassed." Ms. Martinez said that the officers told her they came because she had filled out a report saying that older residents were not getting mail ballots. "Yes, I did," she told them. For 35 years, Ms. Martinez had been a member of LULAC, and remember that's the League of United Latin American Citizens, the civil rights group, helping Latino residents stay engaged in politics. Much of her work has included instructing older residents and veterans on how to fill out voter registration cards. Quote, "I go to a lot of senior events. I explain to them what they have to do," she said. "I've been involved in politics all my life." The cats are excited about this article, y'all. They get very upset. Sorry about that. The officers said they were looking for voter cards that residents had filled out. I told them, "I don't have them here." One of the officers handed her a copy of the search warrant and ordered her to sit at her kitchen table. 2 of the agents went to her bedroom and searched everywhere. My underwear, my nightgown, everything. They went through everything. They took her laptop, phone, planner, and some documents. They asked me about my entire life, she said. They also asked her if she knew fellow LULAC members, Mr. Medina, and area politicians. I told them I haven't committed any crimes. Ms. Martinez had not been arrested or charged. Mr. Paxton's office did not respond to a request for a comment on Sunday. But in his statement last week, Mr. Paxton said that the search warrants were connected to a referral from Audrey Gossett Lewis, a district attorney with the 81st Judicial District, which includes Itasca and Freehold counties, where Mr. Paxton's office conducted some of the raids. Efforts to reach Ms. Gossett Lewis on Sunday were unsuccessful. "Secure elections are the cornerstone of our republic," Mr. Paxton said. We are glad to assist when the district attorney referred this case to my office for investigation. Oh, because of his new jurisdiction. See, I'm still working on, that's a Secretary of State matter. And by the way, district attorneys have tremendous power to investigate crime in their county. This might be best handled as a civil matter. Usually, y'all, it's just something that's regarded as a mistake as opposed to an intentional crime. I mean, that's a big thing in a criminal matter. You have to show intent. And sometimes it's a mistake and it's not an intentional violation of the law. So this is a very gray area here. We are completely committed to protecting the security of the ballot box and the integrity of every legal vote. This means ensuring accountability for anyone committing election crime. Leaders with LULAC and elected officials are planning to hold a news conference today outside the Attorney General's office in San Antonio to demand answers. After the raid, Ms. Martinez said she still felt shaken, but she said she remained committed to the cause. They wanted to intimidate me, she said, but this is important work. So I would look for that press conference today and see what may come of it and what the the Attorney General's office is not going to be at the press conference. It's just going to be LULAC saying we need to know why this sort of thing is happening. And the impact of it is very serious, very dramatic. Did they violate her civil rights? And these are questions that you should ask yourself. Did they violate her civil rights? Who has jurisdiction over this matter? If the Attorney General is engaged in violating Texans' civil rights, then that's a matter for the Justice Department to concern itself with, because the preservation of voting rights is a matter for the federal government as well. Okay, so does Merrick Garland's office, and you should know who these officials are, and I know it's terrible to try to keep all these names straight. It's like a Russian novel, all these names, and some of them sound like they hold the same office. Slow down. Don't get in a hurry about this. People don't have to have instant recall about this. No, not at all. So, did they violate her rights? What was the probable cause for the warrant? That when you have a warrant to enter someone's home, did somebody have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is I've been trying to figure out what you were reading on why they even had a warrant in the first place. Like, are they saying she took ballots or like I'm not understanding that part.
Exactly. I'm not understanding it either. And I don't think it's because the New York Times wrote the story wrong, you know? I'm surprised that they could get a warrant. So evidently, the Attorney General of Texas is now able to say to a judge that I want a warrant to search this woman's home. And here's my probable cause for it. I mean, and you have to, a police officer or an official who's trying to get a warrant has got to swear out that, I mean, and probable cause, y'all, is a very high standard, right? That means that they expect to find, yeah, evidence of a crime in a home. And in Texas, y'all, it's a big deal to go into somebody's home. I mean, you're talking about a Fourth Amendment violation, but you have to have a warrant to arrest someone at their home. You have to have a warrant, the police have to have a warrant to search, and yet warrant has to be issued on probable cause. That's not as high as beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's a very high standard to meet. So yeah, I want to know what they specific. And by the way, warrants are supposed to be specific. They're supposed to have specificity. You know, they're supposed to say, we expect to see, I think they were talking about, were expecting to find voter registration cards. They didn't find any because there weren't any there. Because why would they be there? You know, why would she have that in her home? So I'm very curious about this too. And this is early in our election cycle. I know y'all keep hearing 75 days and blah, blah, blah. You know, that countdown business is really fun. But what I'm driving at is that you're going to see perhaps more of this. And what is this indicative of? It says to me that a message is being sent, and people, when they're intimidated, may not show up at the polls. Okay. They may say, not me, and stay home. They may feel that it's too much of an encumbrance to go and vote or to participate politically. I have to express to you that the last time we had this kind of voter intimidation was before the 1965 Voting Rights Act was signed. And we're certainly going to talk about how the Supreme Court in Shelby versus Holder pretty much gutted the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And it's shocking that law with that level of precedent, 1965, was so easily just, you know, Voting Rights Act. Yeah, it was just worthless, you know, just worthless. There's no mechanism for enforcement now. Districts can be drawn without regard to minority voting strength. You don't have to send in your Are we back? Yeah, thank y'all for waiting. I am so sorry. Electricity, I'm so sorry. I knew that this could happen. We've got thunderstorm in the area, and my faith in CenterPoint is just not what it used to be. We seem to get problems all the time. I'm sorry for the introduction. Yeah, I'm sorry for the interruption. Very sorry. I'm hoping that we didn't lose everything. So if it's available, it'll be presented. You know, it will be posted for you. I always post the meetings because it's difficult for people to get to them. And I thought I would use y'all's initials instead of putting your faces up there. You don't have to turn your camera on. That there are all kinds of reasons why people don't want to be on video, and that's fine. This isn't like a Zoom meeting, you know. And I'm not gonna, you know, dock anybody's points for not, you know, being on camera. But it's really great of y'all to show up, and it's really great of y'all to ask questions. This works better if you ask questions, but some of you don't want to hear your voices on tape, and I respect that. You can always email questions, and I will always email you and answer back. But sometimes your classmates benefit tremendously from your questions and your experience. One of your classmates just asked a great question. How'd they get a warrant? That question, you know, may not have occurred to y'all to ask. You don't have enough experience to know, hey, they need a warrant, and that warrant issues on probable cause. And what does that mean? Having this conversation together makes a lot of difference in class. And it's an important element to this, and helps you get everything you need out of it, and then some. Okay, let me ask you this. I've talked way too much. Could y'all please ask some questions? Do y'all have any questions now? I've got chat on. You can type questions. Oh, looks like y'all are all muted. You can unmute yourself. I'm gonna unmute y'all, okay? And you can unmute yourselves. Do y'all have any questions?
No, Professor.
Yeah, please.
I have a question. I missed the beginning part of the class, and I know you were talking about the article from the New York Times. Could you
Yes, ma'am.
repeat the title of the article?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll put a link up to it for you so that you can find it. And this will be a good story to follow through the semester. You know, what the heck is happening with this? I'm fascinated that this is such an obvious and blatant and aggressive mission that my former Baylor University classmate is embarking on. But yes, ma'am, the name of the article: Latino Civil Rights Group demands inquiry into Texas voter fraud raids. And it was written by Edgar Sandoval, Sandoval, and he's reporting out of San Antonio. Pretty experienced reporter.
I guess for me, the hardest thing to grasp is like, you know, they got a warrant.
Mhm.
This guy's not even, is he even supposed to be allowed to give out warrants? Is that even his area? And then the fact that they don't
Matters.
even have a real reason for the warrant either, you know?
Criminal matters are
Um,
not the Attorney General's thing. And here, this commission, this investigative body, has been created by the Attorney General. Was this created by legislation? Was his power expanded by constitutional amendment, which that's what it normally would take. But does any of that matter anymore? You know, does the theater of this overtake the legality of this? Does that make sense to y'all? That it's much more important to don't be bothered with those legal matters. We have to go raid a 87-year-old woman's house at 6 a.m. because, gosh, this is a pressing issue. What? I mean, you would think that she had kidnapped the Lindbergh baby. You know, it was just very dramatic. And notice that the lines are quite blurred between, y'all, voting is a civil matter. If somebody committed voter fraud, that's usually dealt with in a civil, not criminal way. But it's more exciting to call a person who's been confused a criminal than it is to call them a person that's confused. You know, especially, and my bottom line about this is this. There are groups that would really like to see Hispanic voter turnout stay low. And this kind of activity, which is very reminiscent of some of the governments that Hispanic Texans were trying to escape when they immigrated to Texas in the first place, it just makes voting a lower priority. Some studies tell us that Hispanic voters do not begin participating in elections until about the third generation of living in Texas. Why? Other priorities, jobs, education, maybe keeping a low profile because they're soured on politics from Central and South America. So these kinds of tactics, this kind of violence, this kind of going in an 87-year-old lady's house at 6 a.m., it really talks volumes about the desire to keep Hispanics from non-participation. And there are various reasons that groups don't participate in politics. African Americans are a low voting participation group in East Texas. Years and years of voter intimidation, years and years of trying to keep their head down and go to work and go to school and raise a family and not engage in politics that would historically has gotten folks into trouble. Okay? And where are these campaigns taking place to intimidate voters? In areas that might have Democratic turnout. I'm just going to wager with y'all now from what I'm looking at historically. I think that it's interesting that people want to think that Texas is in play for the Democrats. My response to that is it's most certainly not. But by saying that, what they're hoping to do is get Mr. Trump to spend money in Texas, money that he didn't anticipate having to spend because he thought he had Texas all sewed up. But this was the case back in '92 with Clinton Gore. At one point, Clinton Gore was about 50-50 with George H.W. Bush in Texas. And that meant the Bush team had to spend money in Texas for advertising and paying people to go out and knock on doors and that sort of thing when they didn't anticipate doing that. And so the Harris campaign is very reminiscent in a lot of ways to Clinton Gore. It has very much the same kind of energy, getting on the bus, doing the bus tour, what's called retail politics. Well, in Texas, that's scary because of crowd size and because your urban areas, and what I mean by scary is it scares Republicans into thinking that, oh, we're going to spend more money here. And if they spend more money in Texas, that means they can't spend more money in other states where they actually have a shot, or they're actually safe. So what's going to happen here is this: your urban areas, your San Antonio, your Austin, your not so much Waco, but up 35, Dallas County, maybe Tarrant County, maybe Fort Worth. Your urban areas, Houston, of course, Fort Bend County, they're going to go Democratic. But I don't anticipate large Democratic turnout in the suburbs for Harris. I don't anticipate West Texas or East Texas. Certainly not the Panhandle, certainly not Midland, Odessa, El Paso. Those cities are not going to go for Harris. Some cities will, but don't say urban Texas means Democrats, because you got to be very specific, because our cities are very, very different. There's a lot of difference between Houston and Midland, Odessa. There's a heck of a lot of difference between Amarillo and Austin. There's no compare contrast there. They're just way different. Okay. So this is about the election, and it's about down ballot races. What I mean by that, it's not just presidential, but they're worried about a huge Hispanic presence in the Texas legislature and the impact that could have. They're concerned about city council races and mayoral races. So every little bit of voter intimidation works in their favor. Okay. So we got off to a big start, y'all, having a whole article in the dang New York Times to talk about, and a juicy one at that, where you've got state officials and warrants and raids at 6 a.m. I mean, this is the stuff of motion pictures, except it's not. So what we're seeing is the kind of ugliness we experienced in the 60s with voting rights once again playing out. And state officials who used to, mind their own business, for heaven's sakes, and do the people's business, are working a whole lot for the people right now. And that can be very intimidating. Doing a little housekeeping for y'all, just, 3 exams, multiple choice. You've got 3 days to take them. You have 3 opportunities to take them. So, you can take it, not do well, not fall apart, study some more, take it again. Open note, open book, open transcripts of our discussions, whatever you need to do well on these exams, they just have to be taken. So 3 exams and a discussion question. And I have an open mind about that discussion question. I haven't decided on a topic about it yet. There are a lot of really interesting things to talk about right now. It being an election year, of course, politics is present on lots of folks' mind. And, by the way, if politics is not your thing, this can feel really overwhelming to you, and it can be a really big turnoff for you. So you don't have to do stuff that makes you uncomfortable. You don't have to give us your political opinion. Nobody's ever going to grade you about that. That is absolutely none of my business. And nor is your grade in any way tied to that. And heck no, don't feel intimidated by this. And look, if you don't understand something, say something. Nobody's going to be judgmental about that. Nobody's going to pick on you. Nobody's going to make fun of you because you don't know. if you have a question, 10 other people have the same question. And you're doing your classmates a service by asking that. And I'll try to anticipate, because every semester, pretty much well over the last almost 40 years, students have all had the same questions, because some of this stuff is hard and it's confusing and it has a lot of words you don't hear very often. My goal is for you to be able to watch a newscast and understand it. You know, my goal is for you to be able to say, oh, well, it was a plea deal. Oh, well, I understand what that means. Let me explain that to you. I want you to be able to talk to your friends about politics in a way that you're comfortable with and that you're not embarrassed about. My goal here is teaching democracy. That's what the state legislature, when they required you to take 6 hours of government. I know you're like, what? I'm not even from Texas. Why do I have to take Texas government? Because you live here. The Texas legislature, after World War I, said that, you know, how are you going to keep them in Texas once they've seen Paris? You know, they might become horrors, communist or socialist or something. So we better educate them about democracy. Well, yay, that's fun and it's healthy and it's good. And democracy is in a lot of trouble right now. There are large groups of people who do not want to back a democratic, and that's a small d Democrat, okay? They don't want the United States to be a democracy anymore. They are all about authoritarian rule. They are all about who needs 3 branches of government? You know, we can have one leader. It's so much more efficient. Really, you know, or they create courts that answer to that authoritarian leader, or the legislative body answers to that authoritarian leader. And all over the world, y'all, democracy is really being tested right now. You know, from Russia to North Korea to former Eastern European republics to South America, authoritarianism is on the rise. And so we're going to talk about why. And I know you're thinking, what's it going to do with Texas? Well, even the governor of Texas has remade and reshaped what it is to be governor. Normally, Texans, well, I'm getting far afield here and I can save it for the next lecture, but the governor of Texas, constitutionally speaking, has always been a rather weak executive model, not a strong executive model like the US president, but rather a sort of retiring, not very dominating, very, I'm going to let these other state agencies do all this stuff, and I'm going to stay out of the way. Governor Abbott has completely revisioned the governor of Texas and what his role is. And some of that is a direct result of COVID and emergency measures taken under COVID. You know, and once that genie's out of the bottle, once you say, I need this emergency power, do they ever give that power back? Do they ever rescind that power? That's, you know, after World War II, that was a huge question about the American presidency. How does that awesome power stay contained? Well, the founders of the Texas Constitution thought that the governor of Texas was too powerful during the Civil War and during Reconstruction. I told you they'd come mow today while we were talking, and there they are, just like clockwork. She's really good and consistent. The governor of Texas was never meant to be the kind of power that the governor of Texas is currently exercising. And so we're going to talk about the changes in the development of that. Okay. Questions, comments? Sorry about that power glitch. I'll get this posted just as soon as it's processed. If you have any questions or comments, by all means, let me know. Your textbook is free and you're already linked to it. All you have to do is click on, and there you are. You have your assignments. Yeah, exams, but that's not what I mean by assignments. I misunderstood that. Because of Canvas, you guys think of assignments as things that are graded at your exams. You know, I think of assignments of what did the professor tell me to read? Reading is the key to this class, and you should be reading all the time. And you should read a little bit before you go to bed at night, particularly if you have insomnia. And it'll just get you to switch right off. Okay. But if you have questions, email me. If you have comments, email me. Don't be intimidated. This is your class, and welcome to it. Okay. All right, let's quit, and I'll see you guys. Oh, that's a good question. Do y'all want to meet on Monday and Wednesday, or would you rather just meet for a lengthy time? I mean, these classes are long. I've been talking an hour and 7 minutes here. Do you just want to meet on Mondays, or do you want to meet on Wednesdays, or how do you want to handle that? You do know that next Monday is Labor Day, and we're not meeting on Monday. And Wednesday, what chapters should you have read before the next class? As many as you can. But I want you to understand this isn't a race. Y'all should read this stuff more than once. You got a test in September. Getting it all read before the next class is not a healthy approach. We're going to talk about where are the chapters. They're in Canvas. They're in the module. You click on each one of those links and it takes you to a chapter. It takes you to what you're responsible for reading. We're talking about the Texas Constitution. Now, I'm not going to give you a bunch of history that you can read in your textbook about the Texas Constitution, but I'll talk to you about the structure of the current Constitution that we live with. And so you might want to have read that chapter first on the Texas Constitution before we get together on Wednesday. Let's meet this Wednesday, see how that goes. And we're not going to meet on Labor Day. So we have to meet that following Wednesday. So I really do want you to know what your schedule, know that you have class on a particular day, but that may take us a few weeks to figure that out. Let's get past Labor Day and that holiday to figure that out. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind either day. Whatever works best. Look, on Tuesday, the 3rd, I have to go to imaging at Houston Methodist for my husband to get an MRI. And it's a big deal because he has a pacemaker and they have to come and calibrate the pacemaker and, do a lot of magic to make sure that he can go through the MRI and it doesn't rip. It's like that movie Alien. We don't want that to happen at all. And so they have to calibrate it and that kind of thing. He also has a Watchman device inside his heart so that he doesn't have to take blood thinners. Okay? And yes, he does have vascular dementia and Alzheimer's. And he's a full-time job within himself. He's 71 years old. And most of our friends, when they talk to him, are not aware that he has Alzheimer's. But he's had some real health challenges. And, if you live with him, if you see him regularly, then you would know that there definitely has been some dramatic changes in his life. We are trying to get him ready to do a drug called Leqembi which is an infusion drug that cleans the amyloid plaque that is characteristic of Alzheimer's. It cleans that from the brain. It's not going to restore memory that he lost, but it will slow down the march of the disease. The problem with that is the medication could cause a brain bleed. So it has to be monitored very closely. So that means more MRIs in the future. And yeah, we do have a very good relationship with all the doctors that he has to see regularly. Well, thank you all for your kind attention, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Okay, thank you. I'll post this afternoon. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.